Well, again, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this session. Delighted to see so many people here. We're going to be talking about delivery formats, and you may have noticed that the lineup on the stage here is not quite what's in your printed books. You've got more than you bargained for and some great experts with us. Sadly, Lesley Marr couldn't make it due to a bit of a domestic crisis, but a number of very well-seasoned experts have stood in, and instead of a panel of two, we now have three. So let me introduce them. First of all, Mike Nash on the right-hand side. He's a product manager with Signiant. Then we have Ian Beaushaw, and he's head of digital media at Deluxe. And to my right here is Steve Sharman, who is the CTO of MediaSmiths. And I can assure you, as we go through this morning, you'll find that they are all well-versed in the topic that we're about to discuss. Well, I hope you can hear me, because I can hear more music than anything else, but let's keep going. Well, there's no doubt that we've seen some very radical changes over the last decade. I'm going to start from the point of view of post-production, but trust me, I'm going to get on to the delivery side. I mean, post-production, as you all know, has very much moved into the file-based environment. It's enabled many of you and many of the people at this show to move into thinking more about the creative side than having to understand the technology. The technology is no longer a driver there, it's an enabler. It doesn't dictate what people do, it enables them to do what they want to do. But it goes further. File-based production has helped costs to come down from the individual user who can buy Final Cut Pro. I don't know how much it is these days for $1,000. Great price compared to 10 or 20 years ago. But even at the enterprise level, enterprise systems are still expensive. But on the file-based production side, enterprise systems can do infinitely more than they did before. They can be more productive, which means that although the costs may be high, they can achieve more for the same budgets. But despite all this good news, there is one shocking reality. After all that good work that is done on the file-based side of things, very often the end product is still delivered on tape. And that seems to be a bit of a travesty in this day and age, to spend the time going from the file, dubbing it to tape, transporting it to where it needs to be, and then ingesting it again into the transmission system. Why are we still doing this? And how long is it going to be before we can get tape out of our system? That's part of the question today. What's holding us back? So with that in mind, moving on then to the distribution side of things, let's try and get a picture of where we are now and how we're going to move forward. What I'll do is I'll invite each of our panelists to say a few words first so that you can understand where they're coming from, what their key thoughts are, and then we'll move on to some specific questions. So Mike, you first. What is your take on the whole story of content delivery?
Well, is my mic on? Yeah, okay. So as a vendor, and working with a large number of broadcasters, what we see is, certainly here in the UK, some of the very large public broadcasters trying to promote their delivery standards, and a little bit of struggle with the suppliers trying to meet those requirements. But more generally, we definitely see requirements not just for the delivery standards being, the specific play to error file, but all the ancillary metadata that needs to accompany it to support a workflow. So we're definitely seeing people wanting to standardize, but a specific example like Comcast, for example, has 16 delivery standards, 16 ways they'll accept media in. So, I mean, we'll start. I'll just leave it that as my opening remark.
Almost certainly coming back to metadata.
Yeah, I'm sure we're going to be coming back to metadata.
we're in a similar situation. We have a large number of incoming files in all sorts of different formats, and we are trying to deliver one format into each of the broadcasters. And those broadcasters themselves have different sort of requirements. So we are wranglers, if you like. All of this stuff's coming into us. We're trying to knock it into the right shape and push it out the door. And there's all these sidecar files that you're talking about for landing pad to push the material through. So for us, it's quite a challenge. Hello, can you hear me? For us, it's quite a challenge. But of course, that challenge means that we can make some money on the way out. So it's not a bad thing for us. And of course, with all this standardization, it may well reduce the amount of revenue we can make on it, but it should simplify workflows.
Obviously, the topic of today is standardization, so we'll definitely come back to that. But Ian, when you say you are one of the data wranglers in one sense, I guess you found that the amount of work to be done is more with all these different formats. But at the end of the day, if the industry is successful, there should be less of you, shouldn't there?
Well, we should be able to do more with the same amount of people.
Okay, that's a better way of putting it, isn't it? Yeah. Yep. Steve, what's your take on this topic?
It's all a bit chaotic, isn't it? It's a bit of a mess, and one of the reasons that it's a bit of a mess is that if you think about it, there is actually very little incentive for people to standardise unless they're pushed.
Right.
So if you think about it, the whole reason that DPP is trending towards, or the DPP delivery format is trending towards being successful, is that the people who pay a lot of the bills in the UK, the broadcasters, are going to mandate it as their delivery format.
Right.
But we get and you get the same problem the other side of the equation as well, because basically, if you're trying to build a standardized pipeline, for example. You can't go to Disney and say, "Can you deliver me stuff in your format,
right.
in my format?" Because they'll say, "No, you take it in ours and you transform it."
Yep.
Same on the other side. You can't go to Apple and say, "Right, here's my stuff. Can you turn that into to what iTunes will accept?" And they'll say, "No, we're a big company and the biggest sort of marketplace in the world for this stuff. You transform your stuff." So sure. What it does mean is that, I mean, Ian's absolutely right. It means that that we have to think very hard about making things like standardize wherever we can,
right.
Make transformation a real kind of core of the business. But I think there's another implication, which is that we have spent a long time building systems which are just simply not necessarily capable of doing things in the way that we need to. So if you look at a typical place, you've got maybe some metadata held, and everything. All roads will come back to metadata, and you have to take those and put them into an Excel spreadsheet, and a bloke changes them around, and then it turns them into an Excel spreadsheet using a script, and off it goes to iTunes. We haven't. People are not yet starting to really get to grips with building the kind of systems that can support the kind of workflows that we need at a sensible cost.
Steve, you mentioned the DPP, and there's a kind of assumption that everyone here understands what DPP is. Would you like to just say a few words, just to bring us all up to the same level as to what DPP is?
So DPP it stands for Digital Production Partnership. They have quite a good website, which I can't remember the URL of at the moment. If you Google it, you'll Bing it, you'll find it. And they kind of have two strands of activity. One is the reason that the kind of rationale for the DPP was the broadcasters in the UK thinking, well, we've had to suffer quite a lot going to internal file-based workflows. Our suppliers and the people we collaborate with don't have the same necessarily kind of time and money to invest in doing that. So what we'll try and do is we'll try and set some standards and some good best practices in the market to help out the production community. So on the one hand, there are some advice on standardized production workflows, file-based, and then on the other hand, there's this what's become known as the DPP delivery format, right. Which is mandating a certain type of, basically a certain codec within a certain type of wrapper with a certain set of metadata. And that is the DPP has kind of published that as a specification. They've opened it. They've published tools which can check the wrappers on it, so on and so forth. And that is the standard which the broadcasters are looking to take unique as being this is the way, say, from kind of, well, I mean, so I think some of them have already started experimentally doing it. But from, say, 2014 to 2015, it will be the only way you can deliver files or actually deliver content into broadcasters in the UK.
Is it true to say that it's in effect a constraining of existing standards, that sort of limiting the number of options to improve interoperability?
Yes, because it's, I mean, if you look at the, I mean, but basically it's a set of metadata, and it is a particular profile of MXF.
Yeah.
So I think we kind of made the point a little bit earlier that MXF, the standard, it depends on whose standard, but the whole idea of DPP is that I think the official title of the thing is AS11. Application specific profile 11, and it has a very specific definition of what should be in the wrapper, what key value pairs need to be written into, and all that kind of quite dull stuff that we really need to deal with.
By the way, I will open up questions to the floor once we've sort of had a few rounds here. Ian, what's your take on DPP?
In standardization of a format, I think DPP stand a better chance than MXF, because it's the end users which are dictating what they want, rather than a set of manufacturers with their own agendas. When Bruce Devlin and the rest of you guys came up with the MXF format, that was the issue, I think.
Yeah.
Is that
thanks for that, by the way. I've read the MXF.
It was a good idea, but it was perhaps a little bit early, and it ended up with a proliferation of different formats. But as I say, DPP is driven by the people who want it at the other end. It's going to increase costs here and there, and it's going to reduce revenues here and there, but I think they stand the best chance. And there are a lot of people out in Europe and I think South Africa and so on watching what the DPP are doing
New Zealand
now.
as well,
New Zealand. And if it works here, then they may well take it on. But the danger is that we might end up with shimmed versions which aren't quite DPP, and then we end up in the same boat again.
Again, perhaps I should mention MXF is another file format that preceded DPP. It was standardized by SMPTE. It's a file format that has lots of options, and that has allegedly created interoperability issues in the industry. But in fact, it's probably one of the most capable file formats around. So the industry is still doing what it can to work with MXF, because it has been designed for metadata and these other
and
things.
The DPP are using it as
and,
well.
and groups like DPP and AMWA, which is another group, are all looking at how they can adopt MXF. In many cases, as I said earlier, constraining it to make sure that it's more interoperable. Does DPP cross your consciousness, Mike?
Yes, it does. For us, what we're doing is trying to provide, I'll say, delivery specification services that allow customers to inspect the wrapper and compare it to the DPP standard. But I mean, one of the things I wanted to comment on, which was brought up earlier, is that it's kind of a top-down push.
Yeah.
And when the suppliers I was speaking with TG4 in Ireland, and they said, we like the idea of DPP, but we actually can't produce AVC 100 intra. Do you know someone who you can, send it out to the cloud and have it transcoded for us? And they also looked at it from the point of view of their technical infrastructure. And, if it was going to take 12 hours to transfer 1 hour of HD to the BBC, it's providing some. I'll say there's challenges and opportunities at the supplier end to try and go with these standards, and I think part of it comes back to well-designed workflows and technologies that are being chosen to adapt to these challenges.
Signiant, I guess, is, I mean, I know you're in the sort of IT software side of things, but Signiant, I think, is well known for transferring files efficiently. It's part of what you do. And the cynics amongst us, when we talk about file delivery, the cynics amongst us say, hey, as you mentioned, I can't wait hours for my file to transfer. It's going to be quicker to put a tape on a bike and send it across town or whatever. So now, I'd like to think that is just a cynical comment. There's got to be a better way. So where are we on the technology of moving files? And I guess once it becomes popular, volumes will go up.
Well, I mean, I still think there is some gaps between the desire for file-based delivery and the realities of the network capacity.
Yeah.
For sure. But I think, generally speaking, the overall efficiencies for file-based delivery, automated processing, workflows, ingests are really the bigger picture. The question is, does the supplier benefit from the file-based workflow that the broadcaster wants? And maybe that's part of the tactical challenge of implementing file-based workflows.
Yes.
I mean, I do think that both sides benefit, and as the creation of media moves away from tape-based to full file-based in the first place, it's going to seem very, very odd to be moving something off of a memory card.
Yeah.
And producing it all the way through a file-based thing, and then outputting it to tape. So
it's kind of where we are now, though.
The reality of life. Yeah, but I mean, we are kind of constrained by real-time transfers as well.
Absolutely.
What we've seen over time with IT is that we can start moving beyond that to higher speed transfers. But Ian, I mean, you said something quite interesting earlier about sort of production companies that sometimes the benefit of tape is still there compared to file-based workflows.
I think actually the production companies are getting the rawest deal out of all of this, because they're the ones whose costs and complexities have risen slightly. In the old days, they'd shoot on tape, they'd post on tape, they'd send a tape out, and then people like Deluxe would sort it all out and push it out to the broadcasters. But now they're having to create broadcast transcode formats. They're having to maybe make a proliferation of formats and then send those out to various people. The post-production stage is where we start getting a bit of use out of this new format. But for people like Deluxe, we're quite happy to be able to do all these transcodes and take whatever people throw at us, because of course it's our job to sort it out for our clients.
Yeah, but Steve, let me pick up on this. What I hear from Ian about the proliferation.
Yeah.
I mean, I get the impression that the amount of content is growing, the need to produce different versions is growing, just the sheer volumes are going up. Surely, at the end of the day, file-based has got to be a better way, hasn't it?
I think so. I think so. But I think Ian makes a very good point that there are lots of people that get a raw deal down the chain, because apart from anything else, it means investing in a lot of infrastructure that people have never had to invest in before. Right. And I think production companies, they wouldn't necessarily thank me for what I'm about to say, but possibly one of the problems that they have is they kind of have maybe brought it on themselves a little bit from the point of view of when they shot on film, the stock was very expensive, and therefore the shooting was very disciplined.
Yes.
What we're actually seeing now is that you've got even within the broadcasters, you've got very, very simple programs shooting at sort of 200-to-1 ratios because they can. Yeah. And also quite often because they don't have to pay for the storage and the network and all the infrastructure to have to move it around. So I think one of the pieces of the work that the DPP is actually doing at the moment is we did a couple of reports earlier, and one of the report we're working on right now is. Do we actually get a kind of a creative dividend out of moving to file-based production, or is it simply a kind of a pace of technological change that has to happen?
Yeah, I mean, would you agree that sometimes it's not just about cost saving, it's actually using your budgets in a more productive way, getting more out of the end result?
Yeah, I would.
In that respect.
Absolutely, and I think to your point about distribution formats, being able to take things, to have a file in a sensible mezzanine, and an AVC Intra 100, it's a big file, but it's also a very high quality file, and you can generate lots of different formats off the back of that to go to lots of different places. But I think I'd kind of bring it back to what people need to start doing is getting a lot smarter about the way that they're doing that. And I think that there are some people around that are doing that, and I think some people that aren't.
Well, that's one of the things we've been finding, that we can actually automate our workflows a lot more efficiently.
Yes.
I mean, in some of our workflows that we're doing for our broadcast clients, our workflows have halved.
Yeah.
And so what used to be quite a manual process of putting a tape in, making all these different versions and so on, now can be almost completely automated with a few pause points where QCs maybe come into play. But we have got workflows which are between a third and a half of their original length. So we're kind of the winners in this, I think.
Yeah. Well, I guess also, I mean, we're very UK focused perhaps in this discussion, but there are organisations and companies that have to supply worldwide. And I guess in that respect, I mean, I've heard of more than 100 different versions of a single program having to be made. And if you don't automate that, surely you're in trouble.
Well, at Deluxe, we have about 1,000 different codecs on our books at the moment.
Right.
So 1,000 different end products, effectively. And we have automated workflows which, with one file in, at the end of it, can fire out 50 or 100 different codecs around the world. So, automation is the key to getting the efficiency.
I mean, one of the key words in the topic for today's session is standards.
Yeah.
And this is an old joke, but and you've probably heard it all before. I mean, basically, the good news is that we're talking about standards in process or in place.
Yeah.
The bad news is there are so many of them.
Yeah.
And
problem with
so
standards.
let's just go round one time with your views on standards, their relevance, do we have what we need in place? Mike, what's your take on standards?
So, I mean, as a vendor, I mean, we kind of get it from both ends, not just from the what type of file formats can we deal with and how smart can we be with them, but also from things like FIMS. You know, people are asking, and what you see now is more drive from the customer base and our customers looking for technologies that are, adapting to FIMS. So, the flexible, interoperable framework for interoperable media services.
Yes,
there we go.
Right.
So you're seeing more vendors kind of being impacted by those moves. So I mean, in that case, that's good.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, maybe some of those initiatives are even more important than delivery standards in some ways, because they benefit everyone.
Yes.
Regardless of whether you have the network or not to deliver. So because they'll adapt to, or at least in concept, being able to plug in a new transcoder and have a standard interface for it. So I think when I looked at about the 60 or 70 broadcasters we work with, and cynically I asked a new product manager who was not a broadcast engineer, hey, look at these delivery standards. What do you see as a common thread? He came back with MXF. And so, but now, as someone who's read all the SMPTE specs, like myself, and AS11, you start to realize that, there's a false sense of security around what was initially thought to be a real standard. Just really because standards from an IT point of view, coming at it again from not a broadcast engineer, are incredibly constrained, and really there's no options. There's no can be one of XYZ channels or ABC codecs or whatever. So I think to that point, I think DPP is a great start in that it's very constrained, very narrow, and hopefully more of those types of initiatives will emerge.
So is it a key then to, well, you reference the actual end users in your talk about standards. Is the key then to make sure that the people who are going to use this stuff are involved in the standards development rather than leaving it to the engineers? Is that one of the keys here to make sure?
I mean, I think you need to consider everyone who's impacted by a standard. I mean, and it's a more modern software design philosophy about user experience design, making sure you understand who are all the people who are going to be impacted along the use of a standard. So I think the end user is impacted by the standard.
So let's just see if you're keeping up. What have we had so far? We've had FIMS, we've had DPP, we've had MXF. I've missed one.
ABC intro.
ABC Intra. So you've got to keep up with the mostly three-letter acronyms here. But
Yeah.
Ian, standards. What does it mean to you?
I think if we can get to a smaller number of standards,
Yeah.
that would be great. But I think the single standard, one size fits all, is never going to happen.
Yeah.
Especially when you consider the proliferation of non-standard broadcast platforms.
Yeah.
I mean, there are, as I said, we have over 1,000 formats out there. If we could get that down to a couple of hundred, it would make our lives a lot easier.
Yeah.
But obviously, we're here to sort this all out and correct these standards.
Yeah. I guess if we had one standard, the amount of work for you would diminish, wouldn't
Exactly,
it?
yes.
So you're smiling at the moment.
I'm perfectly happy for there to be lots of standards.
So how about yourself? I mean, standards, and also, I mean, an angle I'd like to bring in here, Steve, is that by reputation, standards take a long time to develop. Technology moves fast.
Yeah.
Can they ever keep up?
No. I think it's the answer. It's interesting you brought that one up because I was going to say exactly the same thing, which is that when you look at, I think there's a lot of effort kind of expended in things which are very worthy, but which will have questionable impact. And I think, I mean, to be fair, I think we started off thinking of something like FIMS as that. Because by the time FIMS had kind of gone from an idea to being a sort of slightly thought through standard, we kind of implemented about 4 SOA infrastructures within different broadcasters, because a lot of the things that FIMS was looking to standardize are just not that difficult to do. Having said that, I think that my view,
Sorry, am I correct in stating FIMS is an EBU initiative? Or
it's an EBU AMWA initiative.
And AMWA,
Yeah. So, but I think my view on it's changed a little bit. I think it actually it will have some more value than I thought it was going to be. I think the problem I got with standards, I think, is that we seem to be part of an industry which actively tries to break them. For competitive advantage.
Yes.
Whereas if you look at the kind of the IT world, then I hate to bring up sort of acronyms like SOAP, which is kind of a bit of an outdated protocol for web services. But people spend a lot of time trying to get their stuff interoperable, as opposed to when you looked at what happened with MXF, maybe not intentionally, but people did their own variants of, say, OP1A for their own particular advantage. And until somebody persuades me that people, I think 2 things. Until somebody persuades me that FIMS isn't going to get broken in the same way intentionally, I'm not really going to believe it. But also, there's kind of a question mark, which is, if we're standardizing interfaces to that extent, does that mean that the guys that we rely on to actually innovate aren't going to be able to do it because they have to fit within a given standard? So, question really.
So guys, I hope you'll agree with me when I say this. I think we owe it to the audience here. In a sense, we've highlighted all the problems, haven't we? We've sort of gone through all the issues. So let's turn it around. People in this audience, I think, want to know what is the way forward. How can things get better? What is the upside of it all? So let's go around that loop one more time about what are the positives that we can take out of this. How can we see a better future? How can we remove some of the roadblocks that we've just talked about so far? Mike?
Well, I mean, again, I'll come at it from the perspective as a software vendor and product manager, listening to a bunch of customers. And I think it's important that people look at their technology choices and just, they need to be pragmatic in the fact that things are going to change. They need good technology that can adapt to change. And I'll say workflow, including delivery, that can adapt to new and emerging standards and or requirements. So, I mean, and I'll just give a specific example. So I was talking to somebody about delivery standards, and I was relating the DPP experience to a US broadcaster. And I said, so what do you think about the idea of us constraining a delivery to you like we're doing for the DPP? Well, so a guy from the ops side of the house chimed up. He said, well, that's good unless the commercial is being delivered on Friday, in which case I can't have the spec, complied with. I need it because I'm going to fix it up and get it to air,
Right.
and then penalize
Yeah.
the guys, the advertising firm later.
Yeah.
So, at the end of the day, business needs to be done.
Yeah.
So standards are great when you can afford the time
Yes. Yeah.
for delivery. So
Sometimes you
there's,
just have to be expedient and get the job
you
done.
know,
Yeah.
and that's a big lesson we've learned from our broadcast customers. The job must go on, and things need to be getting on air.
Sure.
So,
Ian, I mean, you've touched upon it already, but I think one of the signs of optimism is the whole concept of automation, isn't it?
Yes,
This is something that really is starting to get some traction.
It's absolutely key to be agile, and automate is the key. And I've seen so many times in this industry recently where people are treating digital in the old analog workflows, and that's where it's all falling down for some of our competitors. I think that people out there need to realize that the system designers and the workflow engineers are as important as the ops teams and the kit that's out there, because without them, you're working in an antiquated fashion and you're going to be uncompetitive.
Yeah, yeah. Steve, some upside potential. You must have introduced a number of successful projects and worked on them. So, what's the upside of all this new technology?
I think there's an upside in something like the DPP, in that actually the kind of internal file format, the AVC Intra, we're kind of getting to the stage now where things like silicon and storage and networks can actually potentially deal with that as a codec right from acquisition through to delivery, which introduces some degree of simplicity potentially. Obviously other codecs are available. I think that there's also another thing though, which is that in some ways we almost have to say that that standards are probably not going to save us. It's going to it's probably going to make life easier in the UK, and I think hopefully DPP will be more widely adopted, so it'll make delivery a bit easier. But I think what we've really got to do is to almost kind of embrace it and say, well, you know what? There's a platform arriving every day, and there's different codecs every day. So how do we actually just change our mindset a bit and say, how do we actually build systems and build processes, as Ian says, that we can use automation to deliver benefit without having to rely on people, which we always have done. So kind of embrace change as opposed to try and hold back the floodgates of it.
Right. I mean, are these? We hear of SOA, the service-based architectures. Are they also a key to flexibility, updatability, and so on? Because we've got, as you say, we've got to accommodate change. It's a given. Are those kind of architectures the way forward?
We're finding so, yes.
Yeah.
I think it's the idea. I mean, there are a number of different advantages from taking that architectural approach, which is, part of it is being able to kind of do different processes across common services. The other part of it is flipping underneath and starting to look at things like virtualization that allow you to scale some of those underlying infrastructures. So I think it's if you do it right, and that's always the kind of the watchword, then it's something that can actually bring quite a lot of flexibility into the organisation.
I've got a bunch more questions, but are there any questions from the floor? Anyone want to show a hand with a question? You're all very quiet. Okay. I can keep this going. But hopefully you're finding it interesting anyway. I certainly am. We've got some very skilled guys here right at the heart of the business. One area that I said we'd come back to at the beginning is metadata. And Mike, what's your take on metadata? I mean, I'm beginning to think that metadata is becoming more important than video and audio to a certain extent. But
well, I mean, certainly what we see is, and I mean, it really started in our I'll say our PS teams, in the last few years. You'd see various customers designing these workflows which required a certain mix of files. So it wasn't really specifically just, okay, the MXF file, that's nice, everyone knows that. I mean, if you look at the DPP standard and the DPP tool that they put together, it actually creates a sidecar XML that accompanies the MXF. So, really, for automation to be successful, you need systems that can appropriately route the media into the appropriate workflow, transcoder, whatever output formats need to take place. And the reason you see metadata, and And I don't mean just the metadata that's part of the MXF header, but the actual accompanying sidecar metadata being increasingly important is,
Right.
let's face it, I mean, there's very few people are going to wade through this empty standard to read about the keys and values to pick those out of the header. I mean,
Right.
we did, and it was a significant amount of work.
Yeah.
But there's many, many people, and especially when they have a service-oriented architecture background for SOAP or RESTful interfaces, for example, who can read XML. And so that tends to be one of the largest kind of metadata accompaniers to MXF. Even though the idea of a fully encapsulated metadata within MXF was a great idea, the challenge was for, I'll say, non-media people, non-broadcast engineers, is that wasn't very accessible to them.
Okay.
So, I mean, really what we do see a lot of is, depending on the workflow that's required, the downstream workflow is the delivery specification doesn't only just deal with the specific essence that's coming in, but let's say accompanying low-res proxies, JPEGs, XML, and you'll see a large number of files as required as part of the delivery. So, again, you just really need to make sure that the tool sets you're implementing can handle that kind of flexibility. Because
so is this why we're starting to see formats which are packaging formats as well?
Yeah, like IMF.
The IMF, another three-letter acronym there. What's that stand for?
Interoperable mastering format.
Mastering format, yeah. It enables you to derive different versions from one package, I think, is one of the core aspects of it.
Yeah, I mean, for emerging standards like that, I mean, they're definitely different from the DPP. So the DPP is looking at, play to error type formats, OP1A. Whereas, and I don't know the IMF very well, but when you're looking at like OP3C and different things that
keeps your options open.
Keeping
so
your options open
any format,
and allowing you to produce anything from every, you're definitely seeing an emergence of packaging formats.
So Ian, metadata.
Metadata is by far the biggest challenge we have. People talk about content being king, but without metadata, you don't know what that content is. And the problem is everybody has a different spin on what metadata they require. And so what we've been doing at Deluxe is to try and build a central metadata base, if you like, where we can put in all sorts of metadata in our own prescriptive format. And from that, we can pull out whatever metadata each end user requires. I mean, all our different broadcast clients have a different metadata sidecar file requirements as it comes in. So to try and wrangle that metadata and get it into a format that is suitable is proving to be a challenge. I think that's the one thing that we'll never be able to achieve as an industry. I don't think we'll ever be able to standardize metadata because there are too many different requirements.
So actually, this is something I've learned today, is that I wasn't aware that the so-called sidecar metadata was such a major feature of today's interchange.
Quite a lot of landing pads
It's not all going into the file as part of the file.
If you don't have your sidecar sitting with your file as it comes in, then your landing pad is going to completely ignore and delete the file coming in. And it only takes one tiny bit of information to be wrong, and then it's all thrown out. There's no human eye looking over that thinking, oh, no, I know what they meant. They didn't mean to write that. It just bins it.
I've seen your head nodding quite a lot to this concept of the need for this sidecar metadata. And do you also agree that, I think it's kind of intuitively obvious that how important metadata is in all of this?
Absolutely, because I mean, it's if you look at the kind of the some of the problems that we've got once stuff has actually been delivered, it's all about cataloging and findability and being able to price and sell things on the platforms it's going to. And if you don't have that combination of technical metadata and editorial metadata, you just can't do it. And I think just to kind of echo what Ian says, we're seeing increasingly broadcasters and other kind of prep houses really starting to invest in kind of media asset management infrastructures and metadata management infrastructures, which are able to produce those sorts of files in the right formats for the different platforms.
Again, we are creeping up to the closing time. Are there any questions this time from the floor? Sorry, no. Oh, we've got one there. Do we have a microphone or? Got one here.
I think it's.
Guys, just quickly comment on where you see DRM playing into the whole delivery standardization.
Good question. Thank you. DRM, anyone?
Attached at the attached after it's after you delivered the master.
Right. That's
Unless there is a particular requirement to encrypt stuff before you send it, which I think in digital cinema there is.
Ian?
Yeah, well, it's not really something we are heavily involved in. We supply two DRM systems, but DRM is done by the end user.
Yeah. Does DRM figure in your life?
Not really. From our
Yeah.
perspective, it's encrypted transport and signed hashes, but we're not impacted as a vendor by DRM ourselves. I agree with the digital cinema comment. Absolutely.
I'm going to ask each of them now in closing a question that I haven't primed them for, so
good.
got them all nervous. But just a simple closing thing. You're now all powerful. What would you like to see done to move things forward to get to a better place?
Free 10 gig networks for all suppliers. I mean,
Right.
that's really the thing that's the magic bullet. Even the large suppliers like Discovery Networks, when I was talking to them yesterday, they saw a 10-fold increase overnight in their digital deliveries by upgrading their network pipe.
Right.
So it's the desire's there.
Yeah. But I mean, I often think that when I think of standards as it's like politics as much as it is technology. There's in some ways a better chance to solve the technical problems than some of the political ones, and that's a technical challenge. That will happen, won't it? At
Absolutely.
some stage.
I think it's happening.
Yeah.
You're looking at 4G on phones. I mean, the bandwidth is ever increasing.
Yeah.
So we're going to get there,
Yeah.
and that would be my only wish.
Yep.
Sooner.
Ian, what's your positive message to close on?
It's a good question. I think the key for us is to see more interoperability between IT systems. So
Right.
all of this kit that you can buy off the shelf out there, if it could talk to other pieces of kit, then that's where the automation of workflow comes in, and that's where we will truly see some advantage to this standardization.
Interoperability in the IT world as well as in
yeah.
the
That's
video world.
it's not just the format world. It's not just
Yeah.
metadata. It's the whole industry.
Fair comment.
Cool.
Steve?
Both of those,
Yeah.
and I think more communication between the different parties in the supply chains, because it often feels to me that actually the different parties are almost working against each other, whereas they should be actually working with each other to get the right output, and that's right from the kind of the planning through to the consumption.
Well, I guess also we're seeing a lot of commercial interests coming in here that have got an interest in keeping things separate, and so more cooperation ultimately would be for the better of the industry, I guess. Okay, perhaps a good sort of few words to end on. So our time is up. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope you found this session enjoyable. It's been very informative, a lot of three-letter acronyms, and so at least you can now bluff your way through the industry. But would you join me in thanking the panel? It's been an excellent session. Thank you.